Tell the students, just to start with, a little bit about your background and maybe what about your upbringing affected the career you ultimately have chosen.
That's my pleasure, and I thank you for inviting me here today. It's always fun for me to come back and seeing all of you have to sweat and attend class and do things. Because I do have memories of that.
That's a little sick, Robert.
But no, it's fun to come back and to share. It genuinely is. And I appreciate every opportunity to get to know any of you law students. And I will tell you at the outset, if I can ever do anything to help you, my number's in the book. I'm not hard to find. And I enjoy those calls. And I welcome them. But to talk about why I'm here, what you're asking, my dad was a Baptist minister. And so, in fact, when I was born, he did two things. He was the Baptist minister, and he was also a coach. He coached over in South Carolina at a little town called Irmo. But his girls' team had won the state championship in basketball way back when. So he loved sports. My dad was very much a sports person, and at least so far, I can tell you that it must skip a generation in my family. I love sports, but I am not very good at sports.
Your son is an excellent athlete.
My son enjoyed it, and in fact, he had some special instruction from Coach Longan one time.
Small town.
And in fact, that's probably how I got to know you first, between that and the Inn of Court here. And I certainly got to know you more in depth quickly, I think, through the coaching. Which, if I might add, and I'll answer your question very shortly.
I will insist.
But one of the things that I regret when I was in law school is I did not take time to get to know a lot of the professors more personally. I think that is something, and not just professors, but attorneys in town, other people connected with the law school, and to be connected and know these folks, because you will find that most are extremely interesting, and that contact can be very beneficial in many ways. But to explain now, my dad was a coach and a Baptist minister. He pastored a small church full time back then. And I think when I was about 2 years old, he decided that God wanted him to be a full-time pastor and not to be doing that part-time. And so this will tell you a little bit about the household I grew up in. I have a sister. There were just the two of us growing up. And my mother was a teacher. She taught 8th and 9th grade English for years. And Dad pastored a church in North Georgia, and then a second church in North Georgia. The family relocated about 30 or 35 miles away to another place. One was north of Rome, and the other was a little bit south of Rome. And then Dad was called to be a pastor at a church in Reidsville, Georgia. It's a small town between Vidalia and Claxton, if you know that, where that is, or about 30 or 35 miles from Statesboro. Dad was there until he retired 26 years later after being there. And my dad was an unusual person. He loved doing things himself. He loved hands-on things. And I certainly picked up on that. I love doing my own yard work. I love planning things. I love working on things. And so that was one of the big influences. I have never envisioned or thought that I was pigeonholed into a certain area, and just because I don't know about some other areas doesn't mean I can't learn about it. When I came here to law school, we had a golden retriever. I was married then, and I had a golden retriever, but I couldn't find a place to rent, so I had to buy an old house here. That house needed a lot of work, and I had to combine that with attending law school to a degree. But I remember one time that I knew a window needed to be replaced badly. I'd never done anything like this. So I just knocked the window out that was there, and I knew I would figure out a way to do it. And sometimes that is my approach to things. But
Well, let's talk about your career before you came to law school.
before I came to law school,
Right, because you had a career before you came to law school. You came as a second career student. You were a pharmacist.
that's true.
Right? How did that change come about? You had a perfectly good career, right? And then you decided to do this.
Well, during the third year of pharmacy school, I took the law course in pharmacy school, and I got interested very much in law. At that time, the teacher was a pretty dynamic person. He had a good practice and a very specialized practice in Atlanta. And I went to Mercer's Pharmacy School, which is located in Atlanta. I guess that's what piqued my curiosity. But also, the same year I graduated from pharmacy school, one of the teachers there, a fellow by the name of Leroy Tolliver, was coming to Macon to attend law school himself. And so Leroy and I were close friends, and he was my inspiration, I guess, to make me think I could do and achieve this. And so that's how I did. But it was not that I practiced pharmacy for several years before I actually came here. And I will tell you, some people have thought I needed to have my head examined because I was working at a pharmacy on St. Simon's Island. And many people have asked, why in the world would you give up St. Simon's to come to Macon, Georgia? But it's a move I have never once regretted. It's something that I enjoyed. But law, I wanted to take the knowledge I had in pharmacy, the medical background, and be able to put that together with something else that I could use.
Let's talk about your time in law school. You said you enjoy watching them sweat. It's not you. But, talk to the students a little bit about what law school was like for you. What was it that we at Mercer did right? What did we maybe not do as well as we could have done?
Well, I did enjoy my time in law school. In many ways, you just have to endure a lot, and you have to get through it. You have to be dedicated to what you're doing, and it can be very frustrating, and I understand all those things. But the shift in what I was studying went from more or less a science background, and nobody in my family, my immediate family, was an attorney. So this was a whole new move for me, something that I didn't know a whole lot about. I did good in courses like English and such as that when I was in college, but the law school experience was entirely new. And I feel like Mercer gave me an extremely good preparation. I'll use the word, but it's not really an adequate description, but the disconnect to me between law school and the working world is really related to how do you put those two things together? What is it that you do in your practice? Well, every practice is different, and even if people are practicing in the same areas, the activities and the undertakings of what you do in your individual practice is still going to be individualized. So the experience of law school, I think, is unique in many ways to every separate person. the courses were structured a little bit differently. They were probably more rigid, I think, when I came through. And the move I see, the sense that I have with what has been done in the curriculum and the changes that have been made, and I know this mostly through what my daughter said when she finished. She graduated a couple of years ago, and what I picked up on what she has told me. But I think now there is a much greater effort geared toward the practice of law, to be ready to hit the ground with your feet running, in a sense. We had the case books, we had the study, and you would go through that and you would learn that. Now, did that prepare you to take the state bar exam? No, not really. And that's a pretty unique animal all to itself, and it's just amazing when you think about it. It does not really relate to law school or the practice of law, but it is an obstacle in your path which you have to overcome. So if I could tell you what I think law school really does, the big goal, certainly you're to become familiar with certain areas of study, of law, but you are to learn how to tackle projects, how to tackle assignments. It may be something that you know little about, but yet you have to become a master of this. You become a master of the facts of what you're dealing with, and you become a master at whatever the law is and what you are trying to achieve for your client. And this can be a myriad of things.
Oh, yes. Sometimes it's like, you got to knock the window out, so now you've got to fix it.
That's right.
When you started your career at a firm here that, of course, is very well known, very well regarded, the Chambliss Hickson. Tell the students about that transition and your experience at Chambliss Hickson. In particular, any people that made a difference to you earlier in your career.
Certainly. Can I jump back one step further, if you don't mind, as a preface for this?
Okay.
When I was in law school, I clerked for Manley Brown and Lamar Sizemore, and that had a tremendous impact on my thinking and the mindset. Does Manley still teach trial practice?
Manley has retired.
Has he?
After teaching an adjunct for 40+ years. He retired recently.
Well, he's still here, he's still in town, and I would urge every one of you to get to know him. Call him up, ask him if you could come out and just speak. Tell him you want to meet him. You're a law student, you will be welcomed with an open door, and he would appreciate it. He is a very interesting person. Lamar Sizemore, does he still teach any of the courses?
He also has retired from that.
Well, again, Lamar their firm was a plaintiff's firm, doing some very high-end cases. It may be medical malpractice, it may be catastrophic injuries, but I learned from them the right way to do things, which is to be incessantly thorough. You don't do things halfway, and that's a big and important lesson. You do things very thorough. So that was my mindset. Now I need to give you one other background tidbit too. While I was in law school, I didn't have tremendous financial resources, but I did have a pharmacy license, and that allowed me to work. And I will confess here on tape and to Pat that between clerking and working in a pharmacy, I was working almost full-time when I was in law school. And it's not something that I would recommend that people do, but I felt like it was a necessity for me because Mercer wanted to be paid with the tuition. We didn't have a lot of the financial resources were not available then, back at that time, that are now. But I did work a lot. So that's sort of the background. And now leading up to Chambliss-Higdon, I was very pleased. I did not want to relocate, and I was not looking outside the Macon area. My wife had a job here that she enjoyed, and I thought, if I can be here and stay here, that probably will be the best setting. And I took it to be a compliment to be offered a position at Chambliss-Higdon as an associate. An observation that I can make is that we don't seem often in the practice of law now to place tremendous emphasis on being someone skilled in oratorical abilities. But I was here in the Macon community soon enough to know some very, very talented speakers. Not that we don't have talented speakers now, but people who could speak off the cuff quite eloquently. It's just, to hear them speak sometimes was quite charming, really, with the abilities, and you wonder how someone could deliver such just off the cuff. But one of the persons was Joe Davis. He was at Chambliss-Higdon, and I was privileged to work very closely with him, among others there. He was quite a talented person, and he contributed a lot with he certainly had a tremendous command of what the law was and what it required. He also had an ability in front of a jury just to deliver. Have you experienced somebody who just is captivating by their presence, by the way they speak, by the way they talk? He would do that in front of a jury, and it was just like all of those eyes were always on him, and every word it seemed like they would be hanging to as he spoke. And that taught me a lot, just that observation of him. I had the privilege of working closely with David Higdon. David was an adjunct professor here teaching workers' comp, and he was quite skillful in his ability with workers' comp. He made a very good contribution, and unfortunately we lost David about 10 years ago. But that made a big impact on me.
A lot of people miss David.
Very much. He was a very, very good person and a good connection, I think, for the people he taught, because he had connections, and sometimes picking up the phone and suggesting to someone maybe down in Florida, hey, if you're looking for somebody, I know a person you need to talk with. And those things make a difference in an unused lawyer's career. That can make a very big difference. But I worked with Mira Katz, Tom Richardson, Joe Davis, as I mentioned, Joe Chambliss, and they were all very good friends. My experience, now the firm largely did, at that time, insurance defense. The reason I wanted you to know about my working and clerking with Manley and Lamar was that sort of put my mindset in the plaintiff's seat. I was very geared toward plaintiff thinking. Going to a firm that does a large amount of insurance defense, I was not good at changing gears. I'll be candid. It didn't fit real well with me, but the ability to work with such good lawyers there, with people, that was tremendous, and I had a very good learning experience. And one day while I was there, the person who had done their Social Security disability work, he didn't like it. He wanted to concentrate more on the workers' comp. He didn't like it. Well, I'm the new kid on the block, so yeah, it gets dumped in my lap. And nobody, except for this one person, nobody at the firm really knew and understood Social Security law. It wasn't.
You may need to explain to the students what it is the lawyer who does Social Security disability actually does.
Well, when a person has a payroll deduction for Social Security, you are buying into not only the retirement system, but also into a disability insurance system too. And the process, if a person becomes, you have to be, according to the way Social Security defines it, 100% disabled. Doesn't mean it has to last forever, but it does have to last for a minimum of 12 continuous months. And it has to be very significant. You're not supposed to be able to do any type of work, period, at the full-time level. So if the medical reasons keep you from working full-time, then you have sufficient medical evidence, you should prove that a person is disabled. My first question was, why would anybody need a lawyer with that? Of course, I knew Social Security was a government system. That right there should have answered the question, because it's a pretty confusing area of law. It's extremely bureaucratic, and it takes a lot. And you apply, you get denied. You appeal, you get denied. You appeal, and you go to a hearing, and you finally get a good look at the case. And that's the way probably 98 to 99% of the cases work. It's not an ideal system, but it is the system we have. So this is what fell into my lap when I was there. Now, as I mentioned, my goal in going to law school was to be able to find something where I could use the background knowledge. Now, I envision pharmacy malpractice, pharmacy defense, or representing pharmacists before the state licensing board, whatever. That kind of stuff, you didn't really need the medical background for a whole lot. It would be a help. But with the disability work, I found, hey, this is the perfect thing for me, because I draw upon the medical knowledge in every case. And I certainly will not say it makes my work easier. Easy, I mean, but it does help, it makes it easier, and the comprehension of the medical issues makes a big difference. It allows me to do some things and be aware of things that just would not be there but for that background.
You know, Robin, some people say there's two kinds of lawyers. There's lawyers that represent companies, including insurance companies, and there's lawyers who represent actual people. You represent people.
I represent people. I represent people. And you can just, because of the length of time that this process takes, a quickly decided Social Security disability case often is one that gets decided within 2 years. So it can be a lot longer than that. I'm not saying, if you have someone who is very obviously disabled, they're dying from a terminal cancer, something like that, it shouldn't take too many months to get through that system. And often they would not need me under those circumstances. But I represent people. And in many ways, I'm that person's last hope. I'm last on the food chain, too. When they call me up and want to talk about their case. An interview, a discussion with a person can often take an hour on the telephone. And do I take that much time? If it takes that much time for me to understand this person and know what's going on, yeah, I will take that time. Because, well, it's not just because I'm benevolent and being nice, but if I have the person come to my office, it's going to take even longer. And if I have to end up telling them I can't help them, then I've brought them from, maybe from Dublin or Albany or somewhere that they traveled a great distance. So it is simpler and it is far better for me to get as much information as I can. There's some situations where you can tell up front immediately, yes, you've got a good case, come on in. But there are other situations where you just don't know. And there are many twists and turns in this area of law that I do. So there's a lot of information that can be gleaned.
What's your favorite part of that?
My favorite part, being able to deal with people, being able to try to help people, dealing also with the medical community, and trying to scrounge out evidence. I do not know how many hearings I've had since I've been doing this work, but it would be certainly easily several thousand. I don't know how many more than 5,000 hearings I've had. I don't know if it would approach 10,000, but I know that there are a lot of hearings that I have had. And sometimes you feel like you're flying by the seat of your pants. But you take what you've got and you work with it. But the only way you can win the case is if you have sufficient medical evidence to prove that this person, and there are different hierarchies or strata that you look at based on their age, education, and work history. And so as a person ages, once you cross the line from 49 to 50, it's easier. If the person is illiterate, it's going to be easy. And that continues from 50 all the way up to the retirement age. As the age increases, the ability to get benefits is supposed to be easier.
What's your least favorite part?
My least favorite, over the years, having to deal with the business aspects of the practice. I'm a solo practitioner also. When I left Chambliss-Higdon, I went out to do Social Security disability work. I left on good terms. I have managed to handle their Social Security disability work. But I used to enjoy the business part, just doing that. I was always pretty good at accounting, and believe it or not, I used to find that stuff fun. Now I find it rather tedious. I wish I could just work on cases and deal with the clients. It's a situation where it is so important to get to know your client. Believe me, I have won a lot of cases. When I say a lot, what I mean, cases that had I not taken the extra time to get to know the people, I wouldn't have had the information that really takes in a case that sort of teeters on the edge and could go either way. It's that getting to know people that makes the difference, that pushes it over into the winning category.
Let me go back for a minute. You talk about running the firm. History will tell us that a fair number of the students in this room eventually will run their own practices. What is it about being a lawyer and essentially an entrepreneur at the same time that they need to be aware of before that?
If you are starting out on your own, whether you are with one or two buddies, but you're starting a new practice, keep expenses as low as you possibly can. Don't go and buy a bunch of furniture, have a plush office, and do things that you cannot afford. Try not to go into debt any more than you have to. Just be sensible about things so that you're not put in a position where you're strapped for money. Just do your practice like you ideally would like to operate your life. Don't run up the credit cards and all. Be slow. put your efforts and your energy into being effective to the greatest possible degree for your clients. That's why they came to you. That's why they have you. Achieve for them and keep them informed as you go along so that they will know and understand. But just I'll tell you what I did. When I left Chandler-Sigdon, and I mentioned that old house that we had. Now, I say an old house, it wasn't a dump. It was a very good structural house. And it had a garage apartment. Way back when, some doctor had built this, and when he delivered babies, he would often come in late at night. And so he added this garage apartment, and he would just go up there and sleep so he didn't wake the family. Well, that was my office for 2 years, the garage apartment. It was not arranged or zoned, and I wasn't set up where I could meet with clients there. But I could do my operations there, and it worked very well. And that helped keep the expenses down. And it was a good thing for me.
Where did you meet your clients?
You know, I'm glad you asked that question. Because what I did is I went to my clients most of the time. Now, if at Chandler-Sigdon, if they had one of their clients there that David Higdon was representing in workers' comp, and the client was there, I might go to the office at Chandler-Sigdon and meet with the person there. But I went to most of the clients during the first 2 years.
Calls.
I made house calls. Best thing probably that I've ever done in practice of law, to give me an understanding of what their lives were like. Some people would have very nice homes. Others, you saw the poverty in which they lived. I remember going to one guy here in Macon. I went into this very small, it was more like an efficiency type apartment. And I looked around to see where to sit. I had two choices, the floor or the mattress. And so I sat on the mattress beside him and interviewed him. But when you see what a person lives with, what their lives are like, man, that tells you more there than if you had a whole book about the person. You can see in an instant and know. And that's something that has never left me. I've been doing this now over 25 years. And those images, those memories, that understanding probably has stuck with me more than anything else. And I feel like if I'm doing my job, that's the imagery I need to present to a judge in a hearing. Because when you see those things, you can understand so much about where this person, this claimant, is coming from. And you might understand this person probably doesn't have the wherewithal to get to a specialist, even if he had the luxury of health insurance or financial resources. Would he have the ability, or she have the ability, to get somewhere and do that self-diagnosis? Well, I need to keep pushing this because this isn't getting to the root of my problem, like you and I would do. You know, if our back hurts, we know we probably need an orthopedic or a neurologist. You know that without thinking, but many people out there don't have that kind of understanding. And they certainly don't have the abilities, quite often, that would get them there. I love representing people who have workers' comp because I know there will be adequate medical evidence for me in the case. If somebody is married and has a spouse who works and they have health insurance, boy, what a luxury. That's why I said a lot of my work is fly by the seat of my pants, because I can't afford to send a person out for all sorts of medical exams. One of the best psychological evaluators that I know in the state charges, I think, a minimum of $3,500 to do a complete luxury type, for me luxury, type workup that would have the detail that Social Security couldn't refute or argue with. But I don't have the luxury of being able to invest that.
Let me ask you something else, Robert.
Sure.
Do you have a favorite client or a favorite client story, or anything you can tell without breaching your duty of confidentiality?
Oh, I have many. I have many because, like I said, I try to get to know the people. And certainly it will be on different levels. But there are many, many stories.
Pick one.
I was meeting with this guy. We were sitting face to face across a small table, and the guy had lost a leg somehow in a train accident, and he was on the railroad tracks. And so he was in the chair like this, but pushed up under the table, and I literally couldn't remember, was his right leg or his left leg? And I said, okay, so you lost your right leg, right? Oh, no, it's my left. My brother's the one who lost his right. And I just couldn't go ahead and ask him, how did you have a brother who lost his leg too? I just couldn't bring myself to do that. But that was just, there were so many things. There was the lady who looked at me. I asked her, what is it that keeps you from working? And I knew she had mental illness. And that was part of it. She was schizophrenic. But she got very quiet. And she looked at me and leaned over the table. And almost in a whisper, she said, I've got a cracked carcass. And she was so dead serious. I thought, what? And then finally it dawned on me. She was saying she had a cracked coccyx. She had fractured her tailbone. But that was her way of expressing it. And, you know, there have been many funny things. But a group of people that I just love representing are our veterans. I love, if a vet calls me, I'm going to tell them, I'll take the case. I don't know what it's about, but if you need me, I'll do it. And it is so often PTSD. And I see now a lot of people from the Gulf War and such as that. It used to be that I was seeing people from Vietnam. But I remember one of the very first cases I represented, the vet. He was a sailor, and he was in the Gulf of Tonkin, and I don't know that anybody here would have a clue what the USS Forrestal was. It was our ship. There, we bombed our own ship, obviously through great error. But he was on that ship, and it had left him emotionally devastated. He suffered greatly from PTSD. And that was really sort of my introduction into the world of PTSD and what vets go through. The vets with that will typically arm themselves to the hilt. They will have alcohol and substance abuse problems. They cannot maintain relationships successfully. And it can just be amazing. But I'll tell you now, to illustrate something about Social Security, a case that has stuck with me through the years. Believe it or not, it took 14 years to conclude the case. We finally won. And I never changed what I said from day one to the end of the 14th year. It was a person who worked for a newspaper in one of the surrounding counties. She had injured her arm and back a little bit. She needed medical care so that she could get fixed up, get back to work, and that was her goal. She was very pretty. She was an attractive person, very pretty. But we went to a hearing, denied. I appealed to the last administrative level, denied. And I thought, this can't be. So we go to federal court. You have court remedies after you exhaust your administrative remedies. We go into federal court. Well, the court ruled against us there. And, you know, I'm thinking, do I need to change what I'm saying? What I'm saying is right. Anyway, we went to the 11th Circuit. It got remanded. in the 11th Circuit. And so it goes back down the chain, back to the hearing level. And we have another hearing before the same judge, and he graciously denied the case again. I'm more than ticked off. I mean, that wouldn't, you reach a point where it's like, I am not stopping. I am not going to stop. Well, long story short, we went to the 11th Circuit two times, I think, on the merits of the case, and one time about the way to calculate the attorney fee in it. Back then, the person could do another application while all this was pending. I had her do that. We had a different judge, and we won that case. Well, that makes it a little bit difficult in the other case for the government to deny benefits. But anyway, it went through, and eventually we were able to get the benefits. But why that case sticks with me, not just the work and the effort and the fact that it takes, I can't destroy that file after all these years even. It takes up a drawer and a half. But you learn, you see before your very eyes the fact that benefits delayed but eventually won are not the same as benefits that come on time. Because here's what happened to that person. I said she was very pretty, beautiful. If you saw a picture of her at day 1 versus the end of year 14, you would not have a clue. The only resemblance probably would be the color of her skin and the fact that she was female. That's about all you could tell. She had attempted suicide, I think, 3 times. She had been hospitalized for mental problems. And she didn't really start out with mental problems. It was just the lack of medical care and everything that she was dealing with. So I attribute all of this to the case. But we did eventually get the benefits, and you see something like that. And as I said, I work with a very bureaucratic system. Another case that sticks with me, I had 2 brothers. They were extremely muscular. They were fairly short. And I mean my height or so. And they were overweight beyond that. They were more or less 30 years old. Perhaps one was maybe 29, the other might have been 33. But they both had obstructive sleep apnea. And do y'all know what that is? Sleep apnea is just where during the course of your sleep at night, or certainly in the daytime if you're lying down, but the muscles in your throat relax. The excess tissue in your throat relaxes or gets in the way of the breathing passageway. And essentially it just cuts off the air. Well, normally your brain will tell you, wake up, move, reposition, change, get where you can breathe. The danger is some people will have apneic experiences per hour that are more than 100 times. And these guys were both around 130, I think. Well, we won the case of one of the guys. And he was able to get the machine that helps. It's called a CPAP. It's a machine that you put on a mask and it forces air in. The pressure is not so great that you can't breathe out, but it's just this continuous positive air pressure, CPAP. We got that for him and all was well. I got a call from him one day. His brother had died. Now these guys had to sleep sitting up. It was that bad. But despite my best efforts, I had called everybody, I had written letters about it and how necessary it was. I couldn't move the bureaucracy to get that guy a machine in time. And it will always haunt me. I did everything within my power, but you think about the odds are greatly in favor that had this guy had a CPAP machine like his brother did, he would be with us today. And so that's, when you experience something like that, that's a great responsibility on your shoulders, and you cannot cut your clients short. You owe them a lot. And that's one thing, no matter what you're doing, if you're representing an insurance company, or if you're representing a corporation, or if you represent an individual, you give it everything you've got. You be realistic, but don't be slack in your work.
You anticipated my next question, which was, I wanted to give you a chance if you had any advice for the students to do that, and then I'm going to invite them to ask you questions. You had started giving them advice.
Well,
anything you think they need to hear?
yeah. In life, in the practice of law, it's easy to become discouraged. You think about it. The other side's supposed to beat me down. I'm supposed to beat them down. My advice is, don't give up. Not until it's over. You just don't quit. You never know. I remember in my tender days as a new associate at Chambliss-Higdon, one of my assignments was to go to the calendar call in Twiggs County and argue a motion that the plaintiff had made in a case, this insurance defense case. You know what? That was a long calendar call. And when it came to about 3 hours, the plaintiff's attorney came and said, Robin, I'm just going to concede. I got to leave. I didn't think my motion was all that strong anyway. And I'm thinking, yes, I can go back and tell them what a good job I have achieved for the client today. And the truth is, what I did was simply outsit the other one. I didn't do anything more. It never got argued. But I didn't give up. I don't know what would have been the outcome, actually. I can't even remember what the motion was about. But that's one thing. You don't quit. And if I may digress just slightly here, I don't remember what the number of people in my class was. I think it was higher back then, the number of people in class. But there were a handful of people in the class who just really felt like they couldn't hack it. They couldn't do it. In fact, I think everybody in the class had that feeling at some time or another. But most didn't feel so discouraged that they needed to leave. The big lesson, and this is perhaps the biggest lesson I learned in law school, is you just don't quit. You keep doing what you're doing. It fits together eventually. It may not always fit together at the beginning or what you see now. But you have chosen something that is honorable and good. And you can go out there and do great things. You can go out there and do just about anything you choose to do, because law touches every area. And I would say pray about your feelings, but certainly don't let disappointment or discouragement dictate to you the course of your entire future, when if you just stay in your seat long enough, it'll begin to click and you'll make it through. And I guarantee you, those 5, 6, or 7 people who dropped out, they could have made it. They had the smarts up here, but they got scared somehow. And I'm not saying they made the wrong decision, but if they thought that, if the reason they dropped out was their perception of their inabilities to do what they needed to do, they were just flat out wrong, and they didn't know that. The other thing I would suggest to you and want you to know is, don't ever let law, so look, I'm not saying this for law school so much, it is consuming and out of necessity, and I understand that. But when you go to practice law, don't let it become so consuming that you don't have a life that's independent of law. if you want to rise to the greatest level of achievement in your practice, you got to have other interests. You got to have something that you can do for a downtime. I always suggest everybody ought to be exercising. You ought to be out running, at the very least walk, get out, do something every day where you actually put some fresh air down in your lungs. But have interest, have a family. Don't just let law dictate your entire life. Because you'll find when you get away from it and you reflect back on some issues that you're pondering or whatever it may be, that rest, relaxation, or something that's so vastly different from law will help you tremendously. And it is something important. So have a life in addition to law so that you really can rise to the greatest level possible in the field of law.
I've only left a few minutes for questions, and I apologize, I didn't manage the time very well, but what questions do you all have?
What you're saying is you didn't shut me up soon enough. I would be glad to try and answer any question you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Bargeron? Or did he answer every question? And more? Yes, sir.
Okay. So you said that your approach has often been sort of knock the window out and then figure it out after that. What would you say are some of the disadvantages to that approach that we should be aware of before we try it ourselves?
Well, I don't suggest that approach in every instance. I knew when I was doing that I could figure it out, and I knew I would. And it sort of cleared the area so that I didn't have to be constrained by what was there and was useless. And I'm saying this somewhat metaphorically, but don't be afraid to tackle new things. And if there's something you feel like you can handle, you can do, don't just say no unless you know you would never want to do that area. But if it's something that interests you, talk to other people who are experts in that area. One thing that for me personally, where I have changed is when I was young, I didn't have a tremendous appreciation for experience. Boy, the greatest thing in life is experience. And that's the difference, I guess, maybe Pat, to go back and answer that question. The difference between the academic book learning here in law school and the outside of law school practice of law is experience. It's knowing what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and the best ways to do it. So draw upon the experience of other people. You know, you probably will find that most lawyers have a degree of ego. And the strange thing is, we lawyers don't mind sharing our knowledge. Now, if you're opposite somebody on a case working out, I don't think I would go to that person for advice. But you know what I mean. Pick up the phone, call. You may not ever have met this person. Explain who you are and say, I'm in my second year out of law school and I'm trying to figure out how to do this. I've been told you are the go-to guy or the go-to lady about this. And would you mind talking to me for a few minutes? You probably will just be amazed and shocked that that person is glad to share quite a bit of wonderful experience with you. I would if somebody called me up, and I've done it many times. I'm glad to share it.
Well, and some group in this room will be meeting with you later this spring, as we always do. The students will go in groups and meet with lawyers to talk about their lives. That assignment is coming. They don't want to hear about it because spring break is coming. Oh my gosh. Other questions? By the way, if you're lucky, you get Robin because he takes you out and feeds you. Yes, ma'am. This is the last question.
Hey there.
You've got about 2 minutes, Robin.
All right.
As a pastor's child, I'm sure you felt as I did. A certain amount of pressure to maintain a reputation within the community. Would you say that as a lawyer in a smaller town, you felt that same kind of pressure?
Well, I didn't practice law in a small town. I've only practiced law here in Macon now.
Well, okay.
But growing up, I have always said that the best acting school in the entire world is being the child of a Baptist minister in a small South Georgia town. Hollywood or NYU, the theater instruction, it could never be better than what I had. So I don't know if I answered your question.
You did better than answer. Robin, we're out of time. If you can stick around for a few minutes, I'm sure some students would like to come up and say hi.
I would love to.
Robin.